Hugh Grant gives us perhaps his most evil role yet. And yes, that includes Paddington too. How could he be so mean to little Paddington? But this, I think, is even worse. Let's talk about the new horror movie, Heretic. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to my spoiler-free review for the new film Heretic. This is Hugh Grant at his evil best, and there's only really two other people mainly in this movie. It's kind of a three-person film. There's a few very, very, very minor characters in a couple of scenes, but for the most part, this is centered around just three people. So we'll get into why that is and what the themes are here in just a moment, and of course my review of the film. But first, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are one of my subscribers already, thank you so much for that. Always love having you guys return. But if you're not, please consider subscribing. Click that notification bell. Click the like button below. That helps, of course, as well. And comment. Let me know if you saw this movie, what you thought of Heretic. All right, so let's get into it. Like I mentioned, this is mainly just three people. So you have these two missionaries from the Church of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormons, who attempt to convert Hugh Grant. He was, part of their list of people that were asking about more information, so they go to his house and realize quite quickly, I think, that there is more than meets the eye here. And the two ladies, played by Sophie Thatcher, who you may know from Yellow Jackets, great actress in that. And this is, I think, the only other thing I've really seen her in. And then Chloe East plays the other sister, and she was part of the Fabelmans. She's been in a few things over the years. She got her career started in a couple episodes of True Blood. You might know her from that if you're a diehard of that show. But other than that, you do have Topher Grace here in a very small role, as well as one of the elders at the church who sets out looking for them. But essentially, it's just Hugh Grant and these two gals the entire movie. And this is a really, really interesting one because it starts out more as a psychological thriller, I would say, and then by the end definitely goes like completely into the horror sector for sure. But Hugh Grant here, boy, let's just start there with his performance, because this is, I think, an Oscar-worthy performance of at least a nomination. The Oscars tend not to favor these types of movies, horrors and thrillers, not really something that they usually pick. Silence of the Lambs is certainly an outlier, but even that was at this point over 30 years ago. There's been a lot of really great horror performances this year. I hope Demi Moore gets some consideration for The Substance as well, but I'm not sure, but in any event, Hugh Grant, he is excellent in this movie. And what's interesting about it is I think this is the right person to play this role, because we met him in the 90s as like this really charming man, and he did all these rom-coms and stuff. And, here I feel like he's sort of parlaying that charm into what this character is. And he doesn't really change his appearance very much. He dons this large pair of glasses, but other than that, it's just Hugh Grant. But yet he escapes into this character because of his mannerisms, how good the script is. We can talk about the script in a moment here, but the girls do a very good job as well. Specifically, Sophie Thatcher. We focus with the directing on this movie a lot on her sort of mannerisms, her facial expressions, that sort of thing, and all of that really works in this movie's favor. And we can talk now, I think, about the direction as a whole, since we're sort of leaning in that direction. This is written and directed by a pair of guys, Scott Beck and Brian Woods. Their track record is a little bit spotty because they created the story for and co-wrote A Quiet Place. I believe they wrote it with John Krasinski. But boy, talk about one of the best horror movies probably in the last 10 years, A Quiet Place. But then they also wrote and directed this horrible movie called 65 with Adam Driver, one of the worst of 2023. I think that's the year it came out, 2022 or 2023. Whatever year it came out, it was one of the worst. So this one, we swing it back in a good direction because this is really one of the best horror movies of the year. In a year, by the way, that we've had a lot of good horror movies. But what makes this one so interesting is that dialogue and the direction as well. So, as a slight negative for the movie, I will say that as we go further in, certain things start to not really make sense in terms of the real world practicality of how certain things might happen. And I will say I have to ding it a little bit for that on the writing portion. But look, a lot of horror movies are sort of okay, suspend disbelief, but this one seems so steeped in reality that there were a few things towards the end that I was like, all right, well that definitely never would have happened or what have you. However, leading up to that last 15, 20 minutes, and I will say I was satisfied with the conclusion of the film for sure. But a couple of notes, sort of leading into that finale, just didn't quite sit right with me. But leading up to that, the hour and whatever 20 minutes of very dialogue heavy story. There isn't, like I said, it's a lot more psychological thriller. As we sort of go along and then turns into more of a horror, in that end portion. But boy, the dialogue here is so sharp. Sometimes it may be a little too smart for the room. It may turn some people off, certainly as well, that it is really, really kind of, picking at religion as a whole and specific religions as well. But I think the conversations to be had here are interesting ones. And I think that really sets this movie apart from, your generic horror where, people aren't maybe as sharp as they could be or whatever. Everybody in this picture is very, very smart. And we see that in their characters. Even in the the Chloe East character, who is a little bit more, she's newer to being a missionary and all of that. And so, she's a little more unsure of herself. Whereas, the other gal from Yellow Jackets, Sophie Thatcher, is just, kind of her character firing on all cylinders. But that is, sort of the yin and yang of those two characters. It's so sharply written. And here's another one, that it could be in consideration for at the Oscars. I don't think it will be because of the genre, but I think this could be up for a screenplay award very easily. The dialogue and the metaphors used by Hugh Grant's character and the sort of back and forth debating of the inner workings of religion and whether God is real and all of this. I think maybe that will turn some people off. I'm not sure. For me, look, I am a Christian. I identify as such. But I still enjoy a good sort of discussion and debate about some of these topics. And this movie just brings them and makes them so very interesting. Now, a lot of them are spewed out of the mouth of Hugh Grant, who is the villain of the picture. So it's like that adds another layer to it. And then we have the directing. There's some really interesting shots here. I mentioned earlier that, a lot of the characters' sort of mannerisms and, close-ups of their faces and how they're reacting to things are very interesting. But I think there's also a lot of interestingly framed shots here, because it is all pretty close knit. I mean, the majority of the movie, I would say 90% of the movie, takes place inside this house. And so there are interesting ways to sort of, make a small space feel much bigger, or a bigger room feel much smaller too. And I think these directors have a good eye when it comes to that as well. So yeah, I wish some of the things towards the end of the film made a little more sense to me, because it does break down the story a little bit. But boy, what a ride. There's so much going for this movie. A lot of interesting stuff going on. And some fun references too. Hugh Grant's character does sort of have a little bit of this sick humor side too that comes through. He even does a Jar Jar Binks impression at one point. So, boy, what a performance from Hugh Grant. Hopefully he gets some love, maybe from some of the smaller award shows. I don't know. But easily one of the better performances this year for me. I leave Heretic with an A-, and you can check this out now, still playing in theaters. All right, thank you so much for watching Dan Reviews It, and I will see you next time.